The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, forwarded from the Veterans Affairs Office in Baltimore. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, grainy with age. 3 young men in uniform, arms draped over each other's shoulders, grinning like they owned the world. The one on the left was Jimmy Patterson. The one in the middle had died in Da Nang in 1968. And the one on the right, staring back at himself across 57 years, was Edward Walsh. Edward held that photograph for nearly an hour, sitting at his kitchen table while his coffee went cold. Not because he was drowning in nostalgia, though the memories were there, sharp and insistent, but because looking at that young man, 22 years old and invincible, Edward couldn't recognize himself anymore. Not just the obvious changes, the gray hair, the lined face, the thicker waist. Something deeper had vanished. That young soldier had possessed an animal confidence, a certainty about his place in the world, about his body's reliability. Somewhere between then and now, between youth and 79, Edward had lost that feeling completely. His hands worked fine. His mind stayed sharp. He could still rebuild a carburetor, quote Hemingway from memory, beat his grandson at chess 3 games out of 5. But there was a silence in his body now, a part of himself that had gone dark and refused to answer when called. And with that silence came something Edward had never expected to feel: invisibility. As if he'd become a ghost in his own life, present but not quite real, watching from somewhere just outside his own skin. This is the conversation nobody wants to have. The one that happens in parked cars and bathroom mirrors and sleepless nights at 3 in the morning. It's about more than function, more than performance. It's about the slow, quiet erosion of feeling like a man in the most fundamental sense. And it's time we spoke about it honestly, without euphemism, without shame, but with the respect it deserves. My name is Dr. Charles Bennett, and I spent 42 years as a urologist before retiring to focus on what modern medicine consistently overlooks: the connection between vascular health and male identity in older men, not just treating symptoms, but understanding what those symptoms mean, what they take from a man, and how we can give it back. Here's what I learned that changed everything. After examining thousands of men over 60, after reviewing decades of research, after watching pharmaceutical companies make billions selling temporary solutions to permanent problems, I discovered something the industry doesn't want you to know. The primary cause of erectile weakness in older men isn't testosterone deficiency. It isn't psychological. It isn't even primarily about aging itself. It's about circulation. Specifically, the catastrophic decline in a molecule your body stops producing efficiently after 60. Nitric oxide. Now, before your eyes glaze over at another medical term, understand what this actually means. Nitric oxide is the chemical signal that tells your blood vessels to relax and expand. Without adequate levels, your arteries remain constricted, rigid, unable to deliver the surge of blood required for an erection. But here's the crucial part. This same constriction affects your entire body. Your brain gets less oxygen, your heart works harder, your muscles fatigue faster, your organs function suboptimally. You're not just losing erectile capacity, you're losing vitality across every system. And the remarkable thing, the thing that kept me researching long after retirement, is that your body can restore nitric oxide production naturally. Not through expensive prescriptions, not through invasive procedures, but through a specific compound found abundantly in one common vegetable. A compound that acts as a precursor, allowing your body to manufacture its own nitric oxide the way it did when you were 30. Let me tell you about Marcus, because his story illustrates something essential. Marcus was 74 when we met. a former mechanical engineer who designed automotive systems for Ford. Brilliant mind, meticulous, skeptical of anything that sounded too simple. He came to me after 2 years of complete erectile dysfunction, having tried 3 different medications with minimal success and significant side effects. His cardiologist had him on blood pressure medication. His internist had prescribed antidepressants for what they called adjustment disorder. Nobody had asked the fundamental question: why had his vascular system failed so comprehensively? We ran a specialized test called brachial artery flow-mediated dilation. It measures how well your blood vessels respond to increased flow by expanding appropriately. Marcus scored in the 5th percentile for men his age. His arteries were essentially frozen, unable to dilate more than a fraction of what they should. This wasn't a sexual problem. This was a circulatory crisis manifesting most noticeably in erectile function, because that's where blood flow demands are highest. I explained the nitric oxide connection and suggested something that made Marcus laugh out loud. "You want me to drink beet juice?" he said, shaking his head. "Doc, I spent 50 years solving complex engineering problems. You're telling me the solution is vegetables?" I understood his skepticism completely. It violated every expectation about how serious medical problems get solved. But I also had data, clinical outcomes, and a mechanism of action that made perfect biochemical sense. I asked Marcus to give me 30 days. One specific protocol, followed precisely, with measurable checkpoints along the way. He agreed, mostly because nothing else had worked, and he respected the scientific method enough to test the hypothesis. What happened over those 30 days became a case study I've referenced in lectures ever since. Within the first week, Marcus noticed his resting heart rate had dropped by 8 beats per minute. His blood pressure, which had been stubbornly high despite medication, began normalizing. He reported feeling less foggy in the mornings, more energetic throughout the day. These weren't placebo effects. They were measurable improvements in systemic circulation. By day 12, Marcus experienced his first spontaneous erection in over 2 years. Not from medication, not from mechanical stimulation, just his body responding the way it used to. He called me that afternoon, and I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Hope. Not cautious optimism, but genuine belief that his body hadn't permanently betrayed him. At the 30-day mark, we repeated the flow-mediated dilation test. His arterial response had improved by 43%. Not fully restored to youthful levels, but dramatically better than baseline. And more importantly, Marcus reported consistent erectile function, improved stamina, and something he described as feeling present in my body again. That last phrase stuck with me because it captured something beyond physiology. He'd reclaimed a sense of inhabiting himself fully, of being Edward from the photograph rather than a faded copy. The vegetable that made this possible is so ordinary, so unglamorous, that most men dismiss it immediately. Red beetroot. Not a superfood marketed by wellness influencers. Not an exotic herb from distant mountains. Just beets. The humble root vegetable that's been growing in American soil for centuries, quietly concentrating one of nature's most potent vascular medicines, inorganic nitrates. Here's what happens when you consume beets properly. And I emphasize properly because timing and method determine everything. The nitrates enter your mouth, where specific bacteria on your tongue begin converting them into nitrites. You swallow, and those nitrites enter your digestive system, where stomach acid and enzymes continue the conversion. Eventually, they reach your bloodstream as nitric oxide, the master regulator of vascular function. This isn't supplementation in the traditional sense. You're not adding something foreign to your body. You're providing the raw materials your body needs to manufacture a molecule it's supposed to produce naturally, but can no longer generate in sufficient quantities. It's the difference between taking a painkiller that masks symptoms and taking vitamin D that allows your body to perform functions it couldn't complete without adequate nutrients. Now, I know what you're thinking. If this works so well, why isn't everyone doing it? Why isn't this standard medical advice? The answer is uncomfortable, but important to understand. There's no patent on beets. No pharmaceutical company can monopolize dietary nitrates. No insurance reimbursement for telling patients to change their breakfast. The economic incentives all point toward prescriptions, procedures, and perpetual treatment, rather than actual solutions. But you don't need the medical establishment's permission to try something that carries zero risk and might restore something you thought was permanently lost. What you need is the right information, the correct protocol, and enough belief in your body's resilience to give it 30 days of honest effort. Before we dive into the specific method, I want to acknowledge something crucial. If you're still reading, if this message has resonated, it means you haven't surrendered. Some part of you, maybe buried deep, maybe barely audible, still believes restoration is possible. That instinct is correct. Your body is not your enemy. It's been waiting for you to ask the right questions and provide the right support. Everything that follows is built on that foundation: respect for your body's intelligence and trust in its capacity to heal when given what it needs. Understanding what's actually happening inside your vascular system changes everything, because once you see the mechanism clearly, the solution stops seeming random or too good to be true. It becomes logical, even inevitable. Your circulatory system is essentially a command and response network. Your heart pumps blood, yes, but the distribution of that blood, where it goes, and how much reaches each area, depends entirely on your blood vessel's ability to expand and contract appropriately. This responsiveness is called vasodilation, and it's controlled primarily by nitric oxide. When you're young, your endothelial cells, the inner lining of your blood vessels, produce nitric oxide abundantly. It diffuses into the smooth muscles surrounding your arteries, triggering relaxation. The vessels open wider. Blood flow increases. Everything from exercise performance to cognitive function to erectile capability depends on this process working efficiently. After 60, multiple factors conspire to reduce nitric oxide production. Your endothelial cells become less efficient. Oxidative stress increases, breaking down nitric oxide faster than it can be produced. Chronic low-grade inflammation damages the cellular machinery responsible for synthesis. The enzyme that manufactures nitric oxide, called nitric oxide synthase, becomes less active. It's not one thing failing. It's a cascade of related problems creating a deficiency that affects everything. The consequences show up everywhere, but erectile dysfunction becomes the most obvious signal because penile erections require such dramatic, rapid vasodilation. When a man becomes aroused, his body needs to triple or quadruple blood flow to the penis within seconds. If your blood vessels can't dilate properly, that response becomes impossible. You're not losing desire, you're losing hydraulic capacity. Now here's where beetroot becomes relevant in a way that makes biochemical sense. Beets are the most concentrated dietary source of inorganic nitrates available in common vegetables. When you consume these nitrates, you're essentially bypassing the compromised internal production system. Your body doesn't have to manufacture nitric oxide from scratch. You're providing a shortcut, an alternative pathway that works even when the primary system has degraded. The conversion process is elegant. Oral bacteria reduce nitrate to nitrite. Gastric acid and enzymes continue the reduction. Blood and tissues complete the final conversion to nitric oxide. This enterosalivary pathway, as it's called scientifically, becomes increasingly important as we age precisely because it doesn't depend on endothelial function. It works independently, creating nitric oxide even when your blood vessel linings have become less efficient. What's particularly powerful about this mechanism is its targeting. Nitric oxide produced from dietary nitrates preferentially accumulates in areas with poor oxygen supply, areas where blood vessels are most constricted and circulation is weakest. Your body naturally directs it where it's needed most. For men with erectile dysfunction, that often means the pelvic region, where years of poor circulation have created the most severe deficits. I worked with a patient named Lawrence, 71 years old, who'd been a long-haul trucker for 45 years, spent decades sitting, eating poorly, building up vascular damage gradually. When he retired and became sexually active again after years of not prioritizing it, nothing worked. He described it as trying to inflate a balloon with a hole in it. Accurate physiologically, devastating emotionally. Lawrence's case was interesting because he'd already tried medications. Sildenafil worked somewhat, but inconsistently, and it gave him terrible headaches. His doctor had suggested doubling the dose, which seemed to Lawrence like treating symptoms rather than causes. He was right. The medication was forcing vasodilation chemically, but it wasn't addressing why his vessels couldn't dilate naturally. We took a different approach. I had Lawrence start consuming beet juice every morning, but with specific modifications based on his cardiovascular history. We combined it with moderate aerobic exercise, nothing intense, just 30 minutes of walking to stimulate his body's remaining endothelial function. The combination was deliberate. Dietary nitrates providing substrate, exercise providing stimulus, allowing his body to remember how to respond. The changes weren't instant, but they were progressive and measurable. Week 1, his blood pressure dropped 10 points. Week 2, he reported waking with partial erections, something that hadn't happened in 3 years. Week 3, full erectile function returned, sustainable without medication. By week 5, Lawrence told me something I found particularly meaningful. "Doc, I feel like my body is mine again, like it's listening to me instead of ignoring me." That phrase, "listening to me," captures something essential about what we're really discussing. When your body stops responding predictably, when systems you've relied on for decades suddenly fail, it creates a profound sense of alienation. You're trapped in a vessel that no longer obeys commands, that's become unreliable, unpredictable, embarrassing. Restoring function isn't just about sex. It's about restoring that fundamental connection between intention and action, between who you are mentally and what your body can accomplish. But here's the critical piece that determines success or failure. Timing and method matter enormously. You can't just eat beets randomly and expect results. The biochemistry requires specific conditions to optimize conversion efficiency. Morning consumption is non-negotiable for maximum effect. Here's why. Your testosterone levels peak in the early morning hours, typically between 6 and 9 a.m. This isn't just a hormone fluctuation, it's your body's natural window for sexual responsiveness. When you consume beet juice during this window, you're synchronizing dietary nitrates with your body's natural rhythm, amplifying the effect. Additionally, consuming beets on an empty stomach dramatically improves absorption. When your digestive system is empty, nitrates move quickly from stomach to bloodstream without competition from other nutrients. If you eat beets after a heavy breakfast, particularly one high in fiber or fat, absorption slows significantly. The nitrates spend too much time in your intestines, where they can be degraded by the wrong bacterial species before proper conversion occurs. The preparation method also matters more than most people realize. Fresh beet juice is ideal because it concentrates nitrates while removing fiber that can slow absorption. If you prefer whole beets, Light steaming preserves nitrates better than boiling, which leaches them into water. Raw beets work, but are harder to digest for men with sensitive stomachs or digestive issues. Here's the protocol I recommend based on clinical experience with hundreds of patients. 8 ounces of fresh beet juice, consumed within 30 minutes of waking before brushing teeth or eating anything else. Wait at least 25 minutes before breakfast. During that waiting period, avoid mouthwash, as it kills the oral bacteria necessary for nitrate conversion. If juicing feels inconvenient, high-quality beetroot powder is an acceptable alternative. Mix 1 tablespoon in 8 ounces of room-temperature water. Not hot, as heat can degrade nitrates. Not cold, as it slows gastric emptying. Room temperature optimizes absorption. Some men notice subtle changes within 3 days. Better energy, improved mental clarity, slight increases in exercise tolerance. These early signals indicate improved systemic circulation. Erectile improvements typically appear between days 7 and 14, as accumulated nitric oxide levels reach therapeutic thresholds and damaged endothelial cells begin repairing. By day 21, most men who follow the protocol consistently report significant changes. Morning erections return with regularity. Arousal feels more complete, less effortful. The psychological burden lifts, reducing performance anxiety that often compounds the physical problem. By day 45, improvements typically stabilize at a new baseline, sustainable long-term with continued intake. But here's what sabotages most men's efforts. What I need you to understand clearly, because it's the difference between success and failure. Certain foods actively block this process, destroying your results before they can develop. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you determines whether this works or fails. You can drink beet juice religiously every morning, follow the timing perfectly, stay consistent for weeks, and still see 0 results if you're sabotaging yourself with the wrong foods immediately afterward. The American breakfast has evolved into a vascular nightmare, and most men have no idea they're poisoning the very system they're trying to heal. Let me be specific about what actively destroys nitric oxide production and blocks the benefits of dietary nitrates. First, processed breakfast meats: bacon, sausage, ham, breakfast links. These aren't just unhealthy in a general sense. They contain sodium nitrite as a preservative, which sounds similar to the beneficial nitrates in beets, but functions completely differently. When heated at high temperatures, these nitrites combine with proteins to form N-nitroso compounds, which are potent vasoconstrictors. They literally narrow your blood vessels while simultaneously consuming the oral bacteria you need for proper nitrate conversion. If you eat bacon after beet juice, you've just canceled out everything you're trying to accomplish. Second, chlorinated water. Most American tap water contains chlorine specifically designed to kill bacteria. When you drink it, it also kills the beneficial oral bacteria that begin the nitrate to nitrite conversion. If you're drinking chlorinated water with breakfast, you're sterilizing your mouth and blocking the first critical step in the process. Use filtered water, or at minimum, let tap water sit uncovered for 20 minutes to allow chlorine to evaporate. Third, antacid medications and high-acid foods consumed immediately after beet juice. Optimal nitrate to nitrite conversion requires specific pH levels in your stomach. If you're neutralizing stomach acid with antacids or overwhelming it with high-acid foods like orange juice, you're blocking conversion efficiency. This doesn't mean avoiding these things entirely, just timing them properly, at least 2 hours separated from beet consumption. Fourth, and this surprises most men, antibacterial mouthwashes. Products containing chlorhexidine or other antibacterials kill all oral bacteria indiscriminately, including the species you need for nitrate metabolism. If you use mouthwash within an hour of consuming beet juice, you've destroyed the conversion pathway. Switch to alcohol-free, bacteria-friendly rinses. Or better yet, skip mouthwash during your morning routine entirely. Fifth, excessive caffeine on an empty stomach. Coffee itself isn't the enemy. Moderate amounts can even support cardiovascular health. But consuming multiple cups before eating anything raises cortisol dramatically. Elevated cortisol constricts blood vessels, increases inflammation, and works directly against nitric oxide's vasodilating effects. If you need coffee, have it after breakfast, not before or during beet juice consumption. I had a patient, Gerald, 68, who perfectly illustrated this problem. Gerald followed the beet juice protocol flawlessly for 3 weeks and saw absolutely no improvement. Frustrated, he called my office convinced the whole thing was nonsense. When we scheduled a follow-up and reviewed his complete daily routine, the problem became obvious. Gerald's morning, beet juice at 6:30 a.m., immediately followed by 3 strips of bacon, 2 cups of coffee, and a chlorhexidine mouth rinse before brushing his teeth. He was systematically destroying every beneficial effect within 45 minutes. The processed meat was constricting his vessels, the coffee was spiking his cortisol, and the mouthwash was killing the bacteria he needed. No wonder nothing was working. We adjusted his routine completely. Beet juice at 6:30, followed by 25 minutes of light movement, walking around his property. Then breakfast, 2 scrambled eggs cooked in olive oil, half an avocado, a small handful of walnuts, 1 slice of whole grain toast. Coffee after breakfast, just 1 cup. No mouthwash in the morning, just gentle brushing with fluoride-free toothpaste. Within 4 days of the adjusted protocol, Gerald noticed changes. Within 10 days, he called to tell me he'd woken with an erection for the first time in 18 months. The beet juice hadn't failed. His supporting habits had undermined it. So here's what a vascular supportive breakfast looks like. Foods high in healthy fats and moderate protein. Minimal refined carbohydrates, nothing processed. Eggs prepared any style. Avocado, nuts, seeds, fatty fish like salmon or sardines if you prefer. Whole fruits, not juices, for natural sugars with fiber. If you want carbohydrates, choose steel-cut oats, true whole grain bread, or sweet potato. These foods stabilize blood sugar, provide nutrients for hormone production, and don't interfere with nitric oxide metabolism. Equally important is what you avoid for the first 3 hours after waking. No processed meats, no refined carbohydrates, white bread, pastries, sugary cereals. No high-calcium dairy immediately with beet juice, as calcium can bind nitrates in your digestive tract. Wait at least 90 minutes before dairy consumption. No alcohol, which damages endothelial function and suppresses morning testosterone. No smoking, obviously, which constricts blood vessels and destroys nitric oxide on contact. These aren't arbitrary restrictions. Every single one is based on how your body processes nitrates and produces nitric oxide. When you align your choices with your biochemistry, results come naturally. When you work against it, even with good intentions, you stay stuck. Now, let me address something deeper, something that goes beyond nutrition and biochemistry, but connects to why this entire conversation matters so profoundly. Because this isn't ultimately about erections, though erectile function is important and meaningful. This is about identity, about maintaining your sense of yourself as a man, about refusing to accept diminishment as inevitable. I've sat across from hundreds of older men who've described the same feeling. Becoming invisible, irrelevant, a relic of what they used to be. Society reinforces this narrative constantly. You're expected to step aside, stop expecting vitality, accept that your time has passed. Every commercial, every cultural message Every casual dismissal from younger people reinforces the idea that aging means fading. But your body tells a different story. When you give it proper support, when you remove obstacles and provide the materials it needs, it responds. Not because you're forcing artificial changes, but because healing is your body's default setting. It wants to function well. It's been waiting for you to support it properly. The morning ritual of beet juice, proper breakfast, intentional habits, this becomes more than health maintenance. It becomes an act of defiance against cultural expectations, a daily statement. I refuse to disappear. My vitality matters. My presence in this world as a fully functional man that still has value. I think about Edward, the veteran from the beginning, staring at that photograph of his younger self. After 2 months on the protocol, Edward told me something I've thought about countless times since. He said, "Doc, I'm not trying to be 22 again. That's gone, and I don't want it back. But I want to be 79 and whole. I want to inhabit my body completely, whatever that looks like at this age. That's the real goal, wholeness at whatever age you are. Not recapturing youth, but refusing to surrender vitality unnecessarily. Not pretending you're unchanged, but demanding that changes happen on your terms, with your body working as well as it possibly can given proper support. When erectile function returns, and for most men following this protocol consistently it does, something shifts psychologically. You stand differently. You engage with your partner differently. You move through the world with more confidence, not because sex is the only marker of masculinity, but because reliable bodily function restores a fundamental sense of control and competence. This is what the pharmaceutical companies don't want you to understand. A medication creates dependency. You need the pill every time, forever. But restoring your body's natural nitric oxide production creates independence. Your body learns to function properly again. The improvements sustain themselves because you've addressed root causes, not just masked symptoms temporarily. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Not for me, not because I need you to validate this approach, but because you deserve to know if your body can still respond, can still heal, can still function better than it does right now. Give this protocol 30 days of honest effort. 30 mornings of beet juice, proper timing, supportive breakfast habits. 30 days of treating your body like it matters, like it's worth investing in. Track your results honestly. Notice energy levels, sleep quality, mental clarity, physical stamina. Notice whether morning erections return, whether arousal feels different, whether that sense of connection to your body improves. Don't expect miracles overnight. Expect gradual, progressive changes that accumulate into something significant. And understand this clearly. You're not too old for this to work. I've seen men in their 80s restore function they'd lost a decade earlier. Your body doesn't stop responding to proper support just because you've aged. It might respond more slowly than when you were 30, but it absolutely still responds. Edward eventually did more than stare at that old photograph. He created a morning practice around remembering not who he was at 22, but who he is at 79. Someone who still deserves to feel whole, capable, present. The beet juice became his daily reminder of that commitment. And 6 weeks into the protocol, when he woke with consistent morning erections for the first time in years, what surprised him most wasn't the physical return. It was the emotional relief of feeling like himself again. That's available to you, not as a fantasy, not as a maybe, but as a realistic outcome of supporting your body intelligently. Your circulation can improve. Your nitric oxide levels can increase. Your vascular function can restore itself substantially when given the right materials at the right times. And with those physiological changes comes something equally valuable: the return of that quiet confidence, that sense of inhabiting your body fully, that feeling of being present and capable in your own life. This isn't about pretending you're young. It's about being genuinely, vibrantly alive at whatever age you are. Start tomorrow. 1 glass of beet juice before breakfast. Remove the foods that work against you. Give yourself 30 days to see what your body can do when properly supported. Because you're not finished. You're not done. And the best version of yourself at this age is still waiting to emerge.